Moving on, former President Trump has been ordered to answer questions under oath as part of a fraud investigation into his company. A New York judge ruled yesterday that the former president, Ivanka Trump, and Donald Trump Jr. must obey the subpoena from New York Attorney General Letitia James, and one of several legal challenges to the former president. Senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge is following this probe. Catherine, good morning.
Well, good morning, Nate. The judge's order opens the door to depositions by former President Trump and his two eldest children within 21 days. If it's upheld, the 8-page ruling means New York State Attorney General Letitia James.
Hey, everyone. Today, we need to talk about something very big happening in the legal world that involves former President Trump. A federal judge is extremely upset, and it looks like Trump might be forced to answer questions under oath very soon. This is not just a regular disagreement between lawyers. It is a major moment that tests how our government actually works. Right now, a judge named James Boasberg is looking into a program that removes people from the country. The judge had given a very clear order to stop certain flights that were carrying people away. However, the government did not listen. They kept the planes moving anyway. Now, the judge wants to know why his order was ignored and who gave the command to keep going. This matters because it hits at the heart of the rule of law. In our country, if a judge tells the government to stop doing something they are supposed to stop, when they don't, it creates a crisis. The judge is now looking up the chain of command to find out who is responsible. This path leads straight to the top, which means Trump himself might have to sit down and explain his actions. We are going to break down exactly what happened, why the judge is so angry, and what this means for the future of the country.
But their lawyers argued yesterday that refusing to talk to avoid self-incrimination could be used against them in a parallel criminal probe. Trump's lawyers have indicated they would appeal, and that could delay or even derail the depositions.
A federal judge has taken a very serious step that has the administration searching for a way to respond. Judge James Boasberg is in charge of looking at a program that removes people from the country. He has become very angry because the administration did not follow his court orders. He has found that there is a good reason to believe criminal contempt has happened. Because of this, he is demanding that top officials give sworn testimony. He wants to know who allowed flights to leave, even after he specifically told them to stop. This is a very big deal because it shows the judge is building a case. He is trying to find out if the President of the United States had a hand in defying a lawful order from a court. This is not just a guess about what might happen. It is happening right now. The pressure is growing, and everyone knows that answering questions under oath is the last thing Trump wants to do. During a recent meeting, lawyers for Trump said that the investigation is being done for political reasons. They argued that the people looking into this are biased. They also said that if the family members have to talk, it might hurt them in other legal cases. They believe that refusing to talk to avoid getting in trouble could be used against them later. There is a chance they will try to appeal this, which could slow everything down. To understand why this is so serious, we have to look at the details. Judge Boasberg had issued an emergency order. This order was meant to stop the removal of people who were said to be members of unauthorized group networks from Venezuela. The government was using an old law called the Alien Enemies Act to do this. The judge's order was a legal requirement, but the planes kept flying anyway. This is not a small misunderstanding. It is a case of the executive branch simply ignoring the judicial branch. Judge Boasberg described this behavior as a blatant disregard for the rules. He called it an act of defiance that is almost never seen. He is not using soft words. He is calling it what it is, a lack of respect for the law. Now that he has found a reason to move forward with contempt charges, he is not stopping. He has told the Justice Department to provide statements explaining how the decision to keep the planes flying was made. He wants to know who knew about the order and who decided to ignore it. If the written answers are not good enough, he will make witnesses come and talk in person while under oath. Already, top lawyers like Ezra Vaney and Drew Ensign have been told to explain what they said to other officials on the day the order was given. These are high-level people at the Department of Justice. The judge is working his way up the ladder. At the very top of that ladder is Donald Trump. This case is about whether a president can just ignore the courts when he does not agree with them. It is about the separation of powers that is supposed to keep any one person from having too much control. The whole situation started because of how the Alien Enemies Act was being used. This is a very old law from 1798. It was made for times of war. Trump tried to use it to remove people quickly without giving them the usual hearings or a chance to defend themselves. Groups that protect civil liberties went to court to stop this. Judge Boasberg agreed that there were big problems with the plan. He thought it violated the Constitution, so he ordered the flights to stop while he looked into it more. When the judge found out the flights didn't stop, he asked for an explanation. The answers he got were not helpful. There was a lot of confusion about who knew what. Some stories didn't match up. It looked like the administration either ignored the judge on purpose or was so disorganized that they couldn't follow a simple instruction. Either way, it looks bad. If it was on purpose, it is a crime. If it was a mistake, it shows they are not able to follow the law. The judge has been very careful in how he builds this case. He has written down everything that happened and demanded sworn statements. He is focusing on the people who were talking between the Justice Department and the White House. He wants to find out if the decision to ignore the court was made with full knowledge of the order. There is also the issue of basic rights. The judge found that the men who were removed were treated unfairly. They didn't get a notice, they didn't get a hearing, and they couldn't argue against the claims made about them. These are rights that belong to everyone in the country. The Constitution says that no person can have their liberty taken away without a fair process. The judge has now ordered the government to fix this. They have to come up with a plan by January 2026. This might mean bringing people back to the United States or holding fair hearings in other countries. The pressure to bring Trump into this is getting stronger. Legal experts say that if the workers can't explain why the order was broken, the judge can ask the person in charge. If the evidence shows that Trump told people to ignore the judge, he might be forced to testify. This is how these legal moves work. You follow the trail of who gave the orders. If that trail leads to the Oval Office, then the president has to answer for it. This is a major test for the system. It asks if the courts can actually make a president follow the rules. The American system only works if the executive branch respects what the judges say. When that stops happening, the system breaks. We would no longer be a nation of laws. We would be a nation where the person with the most power does whatever they want. Judge Boasberg is using every tool he has to make sure that doesn't happen. Trump has a long history of trying to avoid talking under oath. He knows that it is dangerous for him. In other cases, he has stayed silent hundreds of times to avoid getting in trouble. When he does talk, he often says things that don't match the facts. He is not very good at staying disciplined during questioning. In a case like this one, wrong word could make things much worse for him. This case is about more than just immigration. It is about whether the president has to follow the law like everyone else. The stakes are very high. If the lower-level workers say they were just following orders from the president, the judge will have a reason to call Trump. Trump's lawyers will try to fight this by saying he is too important to testify or that his talks are private, but the judge has already shown he is not afraid. Lying under oath is a crime. Trump knows that if he has to answer questions about the flights, he is in a very tough spot. He would have to either admit he ignored the court or risk being charged with lying. This is why he has spent so much time avoiding these situations. This case also fits a pattern of Trump treating the courts like something he can just push aside. He has attacked judges and said his power is more important than theirs. The judge's strong response is a way to show that the courts will fight back. When we look at what is happening with Judge Boasberg and this court order, we are seeing a classic struggle for power. In the United States, we have a system where no one is supposed to be the boss of everyone else. The president carries out the laws, but the judges are the ones who say what those laws mean. If the president can just ignore a judge, then the judge doesn't really have any power. This is why this case is so important. It's not just about a few flights. It's about whether the referees of our government, the judges, can actually make the players follow the rules. The judge is using a process called criminal contempt. This is one of the strongest tools a judge has. It's basically the judge saying, you broke the law by ignoring me, and now there are going to be consequences. By demanding sworn testimony and working his way up the chain of command, the judge is acting like a detective. He is trying to find the smoking gun or the person who actually said, ignore the judge and keep the planes flying. We can compare this to some very famous moments in the past. One of the biggest was during the time of President Richard Nixon. There was a huge investigation, and the court wanted Nixon to hand over some secret tapes. Nixon said no. He argued that as president, he had executive privilege and didn't have to listen to the court. But the Supreme Court stepped in and said that even the president has to follow the law. They forced him to give up the tapes, and that eventually led to him leaving office. Another example is President Bill Clinton. He was involved in a lawsuit and didn't want to testify because he was busy being president. The courts again said that being president doesn't give you a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to the legal system. He had to give a deposition, which is just a fancy word for answering questions under oath. These cases show us that for a long time the rule has been that the president is not above the law. However, there is a big difference in this situation with Trump. In those past cases, the presidents were fighting over whether they had to give up information or talk. In this current case, the administration actually went ahead and did something the judge specifically told them not to do. They didn't just argue about it. They defied the order in real time. This is much more direct and aggressive than what we saw with Nixon or Clinton. It's like a person being told by a police officer to stay put and then just walking away while the officer is watching. This situation also highlights a major difference in how people view the government. Some people think the president should be able to do whatever is needed to keep the country safe, even if it means skipping some steps. Others believe that if you skip those steps, you are destroying the very thing that makes the country great. The judge is clearly in the second group. He is saying that due process, the idea that everyone gets a fair shake and a chance to defend themselves, is more important than moving fast. The judge is also showing that the courts have teeth. Many people think that judges just talk and write papers, but they actually have a lot of power to make things difficult for the executive branch. By calling for sworn testimony from top lawyers, the judge is putting those lawyers in a very scary position. They have to choose between being loyal to their boss or telling the truth to a judge. If they lie, they could lose their jobs and go to jail. This is how the legal system forces the truth to come out. In other countries, when a leader ignores the courts, it often leads to a total breakdown of democracy. We see this in places where the leader takes over the courts or just fires any judge who disagrees with them. The fact that Judge Boasberg is standing his ground shows that the American system is trying to prevent that from happening here. It's a high-stakes game of chicken between two branches of government, and the winner will decide how much power the president really has. So what is going to happen because of all this? In the short term, we are going to see a lot of fighting in the courts. Trump's lawyers are going to try every trick they know to stop him from having to testify. They will file appeals and try to move the case to different courts. This could take a long time. While this is happening, the pressure on the people who work for him will get very intense. They are the ones who have to sit in the hot seat first. If they start to tell different stories or if they point the finger at the White House, the situation will explode. One of the biggest consequences could be for the people who were removed from the country. The judge has ordered a plan to fix the mistakes that were made. This is not going to be easy or cheap. The government might have to find these people in other countries and bring them back. This would be a huge embarrassment for the administration. It would be a public admission that their plan was not just controversial, but actually illegal. In the long term, this case could change the power of the presidency forever. If the judge wins and Trump is forced to testify, it sets a very strong precedent. It tells all future presidents that they cannot ignore a court order without facing personal consequences. It reinforces the idea that the law is the ultimate boss in America. But if Trump manages to ignore the judge and nothing happens, it will send the opposite message. It will tell future leaders that court orders are just suggestions that can be ignored if they are inconvenient. We also have to think about how this affects the legal system itself. If judges feel like they can't enforce their orders, they might stop trying. This would make the courts much weaker. On the other hand, if the courts become too aggressive, it could lead to a constant war between judges and the White House, making it hard for the government to get anything done. Looking at history, we can predict that this will likely end up at the Supreme Court. They are the only ones who can give a final answer on a fight this big. We can also expect Trump to stay very quiet if he is ever forced to talk. He has used the right to remain silent many times before, and he will likely do it again. He knows that any word he says can be used against him in many different ways. Another thing to watch is how this affects the talk of impeachment. If the judge finds clear evidence that the president ordered people to break the law, it gives Congress a very strong reason to act. Defying a court is a major violation of the president's oath of office. This court case could provide the evidence that people in Congress have been looking for. In the end, this is a very stressful time for the country's legal system. We are watching a real-life test of the rules we all learned in school. The outcome will tell us a lot about what kind of country we are going to be in the future. Whether the law applies to everyone or just to some people is the big question, and the answer is coming soon.